Long ago, there was a hunter. There was a hunter who lived alone in the forest. His days were mostly spent hunting. And he would come back to the empty, cold house, get the fire going, keep himself company through the long nights. But one day, he came back, and something had changed. There was smoke rising from his chimney. There was the smell of cooking in the air. And as soon as he got within reach of his house, he felt a presence. A warmth, maybe. He was cautious. He was apprehensive. Slowly he went closer. There was no sign of anyone. When he opened the door into his house, no one was there, but the fire was roaring in the hearth, and a bowl of hot soup sat on the table steaming, filling the air with the scent of herbs and spices and onions. And the place looked cared for. Things had been tidied and neatened and cleaned and fixed, and it felt like everything was in its right place. The hunter went in and felt more at home than he'd felt maybe ever before. There was no one in sight, but he sat down and he ate the delicious hot food, and he felt a contentment he'd not known. He went to bed that night and dreamt about this mystery without any answers. The next day, he came home and the same thing. As the sun was setting and he reached his house, smoke rising up out of the chimney, the scent of cooking, on the table this hot meal. I don't know who else would long for that to be the case when you get home every day. This feeling that the house was being cared for. And he went to sleep curious. Day after day, the same thing, until eventually his curiosity won out. He came home much earlier. He came home while the day was still young, and as he approached, the smoke was rising, the smells of cooking, and the sound of singing. There was the sound of song, weaving its way on the air out of the open window, and the sound of that singing seemed to caress his ears. He was drawn to it. He looked through the window, and there was someone there. He saw in his house a woman. A woman with long, long, long red hair, trailing down below her waist. She was singing, she was stirring the pot, she was moving with a grace and an ease in his house as if she'd lived there a long time. And when he opened the door, she turned to look at him, and her eyes flashed brilliant green. Who are you? But he didn't need to ask. Some deep part of him knew this was Fox Woman. Her answer to him, though, was, I am the woman of this house, and I would like to stay. Will you sit and eat with me? And his heart said a big yes in bold letters. He went straight in, he looked her in the eyes, this smile. When their smiles met, he felt smiles simmer through every part of him down to his toes. And they sat together and they ate this delicious food that she'd made in the house that she had cared for. And the talk was rich. She knew a lot of good jokes. She knew some beautiful songs. He found himself finding stories in his own memory he didn't know he knew, just to entertain her, and she was entertained. long, so their longing grew, until they moved from the table to the bed. They lay down, skin on skin, and a new kind of magic wove itself between them and wove itself into that place. In the morning, she was still there, and it was clear she was going to stay. But she said, there is one thing you need to know. My pelt is hanging on a hook by the door. And he noticed for the first time this fox pelt hanging there. That is where my pelt hangs. And that is its place. And he said, of course, beloved, whatever you want, whatever you need, whatever makes your heart glad, I am so glad that you are here. Of course, your pelt is welcome. And so, time passed. The two of them lived there. They lived and they loved and they laughed and they worked and they made a home that was sweet and full of longing, that was met and blossomed in love. Time passed. But those of you who've ever encountered a fox, you might know that fox pelts have a scent. They have a scent of deep musk. And the musk of that pelt got stronger and stronger and stronger. As the months went past, the smell of that skin started to seep into everything. The hunter could smell it on his clothes, on the cloths and the fabrics of the house. He could smell it on his weapons. He could smell it in his hair. He could smell it in the food in their bed. It was on his skin, the backs of his hands. It was wreathed in his nostrils. And it got stronger and stronger and more overpowering. That musk seemed to seep into everything so much he couldn't feel or smell or think about anything else. And eventually it was just too much. One night after dinner, they were sat at the table. He took her hand. My love, woman of my heart, my beloved, stars of my soul and my spirit, dearest one, the smell of your pelt is a lot. It's a small house and the smell is really strong. I'm not asking you to get rid of it, but do you think you could just put it maybe outside? Maybe you could hang it in the woods or hang it around the back of the house, somewhere where it's a little less of a thing. Do you think you could just put it out of the house? She looked at him. She said, my pelt hangs there. That is its place. He felt a sudden awkwardness. He thought, this is not the right time for this conversation. I'll try again another time. Clearly she's just not in the mood to talk about this right now. I'll leave it. I'm sure it'll be fine. Time passed. But that smell only grew thicker and thicker. It was in his nostrils, it was on his tongue. The air felt thick, and he could think about nothing else. Until it got to the point that the sweetness had left his heart and left his words. They were sat together one night again, and there was no profession of love, no gentle wishes or sweet things to say. He slammed his hand down on the table. He said, enough is enough. This is really too much to ask. The scent of that thing in this place, it's too much, it's overbearing, it has to go. I'm not going to ask you again. That pelt cannot stay here. I need it out. She looked at him. You want the pelt gone? Did she really need to ask? He went to bed, sure that now surely she'd heard and would see sense. He slept the long night through. And in the morning, when he woke up, the pelt was gone. And so was the smell. Not even the slightest whiff of it stayed. The whole house, there was not a trace of that smell. And Foxwoman was gone too. She'd gone out into the dark of the night, and she was not coming back. The hunter was alone there, in that place that suddenly lost its warmth, lost its sweetness, lost the comfort and that deep feeling of home. And it's said that for the long years of the rest of his life, he was so often found in the doorway, lingering, looking out into the forest and longing for her to come back, longing to smell that scent again, to smell the wild that he had banished. Who knows if it came back or not? How is it for you? And what would you welcome in? What would you say yes to in big bold letters if you encountered it in the wild?